to 6 together. My apologies. The Economic Division in my department assists me in the government in developing and implementing policy to deliver sustainable and regionally balanced economic growth and quality jobs, to promote effective planning and the delivery of infrastructural developments, including housing. The Cabinet Committees and associated senior officials group, backed by the Division, help to deliver policies in these areas. Cabinet Committee A deals with issues relating to the economy, the labour market, competitiveness, productivity, rural development, the digital economy and pensions. Cabinet Committee D works to ensure a coordinated approach to the delivery and ongoing development of policy in the areas of infrastructure investment and delivery, housing and climate action, and provides political oversight with respect to Project Ireland 2040. The Economic Division also monitors implementation on the Action Plan for Jobs, leads Ireland's participation in the annual European semester process, prepares the annual National Risk Assessment, which provides an opportunity to identify and consider potential economic risks and challenges on a structured basis. The 2018 report was published in July, and the National Risk Assessment for 2019 will commence shortly, and is responsible for the liaison with the CSO. The Division is also leading preparation of the Future Jobs Initiative, working with the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation. This is the Government's new economic initiative to ensure we're well placed to meet future challenges. Future jobs will drive our development as a resilient, innovative and globally connected economy, capable of coping with technological and other transformational challenges ahead. It's aimed at enhancing productivity, labour market participation, innovation, skills and talent, and the low-carbon economy. It will be launched in Ireland in early 2019. A unit within the Economic Division works with the Minister of State with responsibility for data protection to ensure a whole-of-government approach to data protection and broader digital issues. In this regard, the unit provides the Secretariat to the Interdepartmental Committee on Data Issues and to the Government Data Forum. The Division is currently leading, in collaboration with other relevant departments, the development of a new overarching national digital strategy to enable Ireland to maximise the societal and economic benefits from digitalisation. The Division also provides me with briefing and speech material on economic and related policy issues.
Can I ask members to stick now to the allocated time, or we won't get through everything? Deputy McDonald.
Councillor, I will certainly do that. I have two things. Firstly, just going back to the issue around the EU digital sales tax, I think it was raised by earlier by the leader of the Green Party, and you gave a critique of the model that was proposed. Taoiseach, can I just ask you if you have a concern in respect of this tax in relation to overall Irish tax sovereignty? If I could have a comment on that. And secondly, on the issue of jobs and job plans, it's very obvious that right across the island, north and south, that there are very severe skills shortages in many sectors, and indeed a big concern now around the availability of labour and staff, not least because of the very, very hostile and negative messages that have been sent out by Brexit, and which are really being felt north of the border. I met yesterday with 21 representatives, leaders of northern business from every sector, and the message was the same, and I know that that is echoed south of the border. So can the Taoiseach report on any work ongoing under his watch on those issues?
Howlin.
One of the greatest risks facing, just looking at our revenue sources, is, and you've acknowledged it yourself, our overdependence on corporation tax from the multinationals. It is a very significant chunk, small number of companies now, of the corporation tax, and that's an increasing chunk of the overall tax take. Has this division had a look at that? And do we know why, in the last 2 years in particular, the Department of Finance have been inaccurate in forecasting what the income stream from corporation tax would be? To touch upon the digital tax, if there is no OECD solution, a lot of individual countries are now planning unilaterally to introduce it. The UK announced it in the budget, a 2% digital services tax. Spain and Italy are pursuing their own. France and Germany proposed a levy from 2020. This is a turnover tax. it is on the turnover of multinationals, and I think it's coming down the stream. Either we do it by agreement, which hopefully will be arrived at across the OECD, or it'll be done unilaterally. What is the thinking of the Economic Division on that matter?
Boyd Barrett.
Look, you said that this committee deals with, among other things, the issue of housing, and as well as being a social and humanitarian emergency in this country, it is increasingly a very, very serious economic threat to this country. The fact that vast numbers of our citizens, working people and others simply can't afford a roof over their head. I spent Saturday at the National Assembly of the National Housing and Homelessness Coalition, one of the pillar groups that organised the demonstration outside the Dáil on October the 3rd, the Raise the Roof demonstration, and it was agreed there that there will be another demonstration on December the 1st to commemorate the death of Jonathan Corrie, who you'll remember died out not far from the front gates of this Dáil. And the overwhelming feeling at that meeting was real anger that, following the passing of a Dáil motion and that enormous protest, that the government absolutely failed spectacularly to do anything to change its policy and to take the sort of radical and emergency measures necessary to deal with the housing crisis. And one point that was really underlined, and I really want you to comment on this, because I think it explains much of the delays and the problems and the escalating crisis, is people railing against the fact that in council after council, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, and I have to say Labour in South Dublin, voting for the disposal of public land to private sector, for private sector development. 70% out in Kilcarbery, in Dunleary. We're being offered similar proposals on public sites of selling off public land, which should be used for public housing, to the private sector. Isn't that why we have a housing emergency? Because your policy insists on privatising public land.
We conclude. Deputy Martin.
Taoiseach, you've explained in the past that this division has a central role in the oversight of infrastructural development and supports the relevant cabinet subcommittees. A number of weeks ago, Taoiseach, you announced that broadband provision is a personal crusade for you, or will be. Now, I don't understand why it hasn't been all along. I think that's the great unstated statement. It only has now become a personal crusade after the Minister Naughton affair. In the light of this, Taoiseach, can you explain why is it that the Cabinet Committee on Infrastructure met only once in the first 10 months of this year? And I understand that you insist that you like to have full Cabinet discussions. You've said that you see the Cabinet Committees as places where there can be detailed discussions, in-depth looks at issues, drawing on papers circulated in advance, and with the ability to closely question those managing issues on a day-to-day basis. But if you look at it objectively, Taoiseach, very clearly the delivery of critical policies such as broadband and housing and health has been very, very poor. And you yourself have accepted that targets have not been achieved. And to me that suggests a very hands-off approach where there's no real central driving force behind issues which the government itself has identified as priorities. So, for example, you have said now, or hinted and leaked, that the cost of broadband will be multiples of what you originally thought it would be, or most people thought it would be. Now, did this news just suddenly appear yesterday or in the last couple of weeks, and that people weren't aware of this all along within the department or the relevant ministers or government who are looking at this issue, which is a personal crusade for you now? How is it that the multiples, the cost being a multiple of what everybody thought it would be, has only emerged in the last month?
All right, thank you, Deputy.
And do you plan to make any changes, Taoiseach, in the way in which you and your departments oversee policy areas and cabinet committees on key issues such as this?
Taoiseach, we have about 3.5 minutes for a response here.
In relation to digital tax, yes, government does have a concern around sovereignty. Our view is that tax is a national competence, and we certainly wouldn't like a digital tax to lead to other proposals such as consolidated corporation tax base, which we wouldn't be in favour of. Having that said, it's not an absolutist position. There are EU tax harmonisations in place already, for example the VAT directive, that's there and is an EU law underpinning the way VAT works across the European Union, and we don't have a difficulty with that. Are annoyed sometimes about the inflexibilities that arise, but it makes sense to have a VAT directive in a single market, and also customs are harmonised across the European Union, and the vast majority of customs revenue goes straight to the European budget. So it's not an absolutist position, but we do have a concern about anything that may threaten our tax sovereignty. We don't have any proposals for a national digital service tax of our own. In relation to corporation tax, we recognise that that is a vulnerability, that there has been a really big increase in the amount of tax paid by corporations to the Irish Exchequer in recent years. We don't know for sure why that is. Part of it, of course, is down to the fact that those companies are making a lot more profits, are accounting for more of their profits in Ireland, and also there have been changes in laws around IP, and there have been changes in accounting standards and accounting practices in the US that seem to have had an impact in particular on this year's tax receipts and the recent increase in them. We are being prudent about it, though. First of all, we've established the Rainy Day Fund, and it's corporation profit tax receipts that are being earmarked to go into that Rainy Day Fund. It doesn't make sense. It's bad policy to make long-term spending commitments on tax receipts that might be temporary, that might be windfall. That mistake was made in the past, in particular with stamp duty. We're not going to repeat that mistake again. So that's why one of the reasons why we've established a Rainy Day Fund and have earmarked corporation profit tax receipts as the revenue that will go into that fund. And also we budgeted very prudently for next year. So when you look at our budget projections for next year, we're actually projecting that the amount of money that we take in corporation profit tax next year will be less than it was this year. So if there is a surprise, it'll be an upside surprise rather than a downside surprise. And I think that's very prudent by the Minister of Finance to do that. In terms of housing, it's my very strong view that the way out of the housing crisis, the solution to the housing shortage is primarily about supply. It's not just about supply, but it is very much about supply. And this year we will build 20,000 new houses and apartments. That's more than any other year this decade. We'll get that up to 25 next year, hopefully 30, 35 the year after. We'll get to the position whereby the number of new homes being built exceeds demand, and I think we'll start to see a real change when that happens. There are over 100,000 new homes already on architects' desks for design at the moment, and that shows you what potentially is coming through in terms of additional supply. Yesterday I had the pleasure to be in Dublin 9 in Stormanstown to open a new housing development, 42 units, 150 people moving in there. And that was done as a partnership involving Dublin City Council and involving a housing trust. Now I know some people say that doesn't count because it wasn't a direct bill by Dublin City Council, it was done through a housing trust. The people moving in there don't think that, and they're very pleased to be moving into those new homes with secure tenancies and are not too concerned about the model that was used. The problem, I disagree with Deputy Boyd Barrett, the problem with a lot of councils, in my view, is Sinn Féin on the left voting down housing projects and voting down housing proposals, and that's been done in City Council and South Dublin Council and in other areas. And there's a real ideology there that the only type of housing that we should build is social housing, and that the only way you should build social housing is direct bill by local authorities. And I disagree with that. What we're facing at the moment is a crisis, it is an emergency, and in a crisis and in an emergency you build as many houses as you can, as quickly as you can, by any mechanism as you can, and those ideological ideas and ideological constraints, if implemented, would actually restrict housing supply and reverse the progress that we've made in the last couple of years.
Question number 7. Broadband, yeah. Can you say anything about broadband? No.
What was the question, sorry, in broadband?
No, we'll go on. Question 7.
No, Dan, well, the question.
Question.
Becoming a multiple of the cost.
I'd have to look up in the diary a couple of weeks ago.
What's that now? So you're really on top.
Please, deputies.
Contractors have to submit a price before you know what it is.
Question 7.